When I read it, I'm like, so Dave's not coming? Otherwise, you know, he could say this, he could say it.
You ready, Nance? Good evening. I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole for the Village of Cary for Tuesday, February 21st, 2017 to order with roll call, please.
Kozler.
Here.
Kraus.
Here.
McAlpine.
Here,
Cavelli.
Here.
Koenig.
Here. Just join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We now move to the public comment section where the public is invited to address the Committee of the Whole for anything. I don't think there's anybody here that wants to address, so we'll go ahead and close that. We need a consideration of the February 7th, 2017 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. Is there any changes, edits, corrections? None? Go on the consent agenda, thank you. And the same for the village board meeting minutes for February 7th, 2017. Any changes, edits, corrections? Thank you. Yeah, consent agenda. Moving right along, Jake. You ready for this?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess the question is the village board ready for this?
Yep.
A lot of information to get through. A lot of staff time went into this. This is kind of our 5-year CIP review here. Looking for your feedback, village board, on this. It gives us kind of that global picture of, for the next 5 years, what our capital projects may be. For our agenda for today, I want to get through, our various departments here. We've got a lot of projects within each one of the departments. And then also, too, you'll see items 4 and 6. So our total 5-year CIP costs. Those are in there twice because that's a very important slide. It shows what our bucket of dollars are and the projects that we want to try to get to. And so we're going to spend some time on that, and hopefully we can get to it here pretty quickly. The objectives of our meeting here today, again, want to inform the board about our, projects here over the next 5 years. And this is focused on the capital projects. We're going to have our general fund discussion on March 11th. But these are capital projects that are generally over $20,000 in costs, and that includes our facilities, infrastructure, such as roads, and any kind of stormwater-related work, vehicle and equipment fund, water and sanitation fund, and then also your commuter parking fund. So again, get your feedback. We've got priorities listed within here, and we've got a lot of projects. Want to get some specific feedback on those various priorities, but also on 2 projects that we have listed, the streetscape and then also the police/village hall building here, if that's something that we want to proceed with. There aren't going to be any decisions that we're going to make today. I'll take whatever feedback you have, the more the better, but nothing is final within this. So what is the capital plan? We haven't done this previously, nothing wrong with that, but this kind of gives you the snapshot of what we have planned for the next 5 years. So it identifies, both current, this next fiscal year projects, but then looking out 5 years. These are all estimates for you. Numbers are going to change throughout the years. It's important if we go back, to those slides that I mentioned, the really important ones, it shows these are our expected, costs, and these are the revenues that we have to put towards it. So you can look and see, well, where do we have a shortfall? And we can talk about that, as a group of how we fill that shortfall. Maybe there are some projects that we don't do. Maybe there are some funding sources that we look at. There will be annual adjustments made to this CIP program. So this is the first, and I know the first it's going to be the hardest. It was the hardest for staff. I mean, we had a lot of information that we went and we put together, and so it took us a lot of time, but it's going to be easier next year, and it'll be easier for the board. The first year is tough, and priorities are going to change. We've got an election coming up, and different individuals are going to have different priorities, but we're going to look at this next year, and things may move around a little bit. Why do we do this? Well, first of all, I think, and most importantly, is that this is one of our largest expenditures as we do our budget process. We've got some pretty big numbers within the capital projects fund, and I think the village board needs to look at this and figure out what are the priorities here. Outlines multi-year plan projects. Again, this is something for the village board. It's something for staff that we can use for planning and prioritizing, but also it's important for your residents. You're able to say, as far as capital projects go, here's our vision. Here's what is important to us. This is our roadmap for the future. Allows us to, again, I've hit on it and I'm going to continue to hit on it, but prioritize our needs, maximize the resources that we have here. If you look at the end of the slides, there's like a $33 million number of all in if we want to do everything, and we have approximately $14 million to spend on that. It's not unusual. That is not unusual from municipality to municipality. It's just, I want to make sure that you have everything you need to be able to make informed decisions about the projects here for the village. This is a planning tool. This is something that, again, we're going to use, every year. Again, why do we complete it? Allowing for the phased projects. If we look at something such as, if the village board wants to proceed with, our police, public safety, village hall building, there's a phasing that's involved in that. There's a planning step, and we get into design, and then also the construction. That's similar with many of the projects that you're going to see here. It gives you guidance, for future budget years that you can look at. It also, and very important, it ensures that the infrastructure is being maintained. You'll see in here some information about buildings. You'll also see information related to roads. And you can look out 5 years to see, well, what are the roads going to be? What are the projects that we have planned? Are those important? Should we be funding those? It helps us to, reduce surprise expenses. I don't like to be surprised. I know the village board doesn't like to be surprised about expenses that come up. Things will change. There are going to be projects that, we're not going to be able to catch. We're not going to get everything. Emergencies are going to come up, and we'll deal with those when they occur. It's also looked on favorably by rating agencies. So we'll just dive into this. We're going to go over every department's requests and needs here, and we'll start where we're at here in the Village Hall. Village Hall capital projects that we've got identified. I'm not going to go through every one. There's a couple that I'll just hit on here, but agenda management and web streaming, that's one thing that I know the board is interested in looking at, and we've started the research for that. This gives you an idea, and this is why we do this, so you have an idea of what these costs are going to be, especially for the out years. This is a project that it's not cheap. I look at it though as you have an opportunity to improve your customer service with this. We currently probably pay approximately $6,000 to $8,000 for a consultant to be here, and you just have to weigh that. Is it that much of a priority that we want to spend X amount of dollars more? What are the benefits that we're going to gain out of that? Another project that I'll hit on here, our ERP system, our financial software that we use. That's down a couple rows. It's a big expense, but what we're using right now is it's archaic. And I don't know if 1920, 2021 is a perfect spot for it, but it's included on this list, and we have to be cognizant that that's something that will have to be updated here anytime soon. Are there any questions regarding Village Hall capital projects? Facilities. So again, we're staying with the theme here of Village Hall. I've kind of grouped things together as far as maintenance items and major repair items, and there's some big expenses here over the next few years. Our great room, truss and roof repair. For those of you that haven't seen it, right now we've got some bracing in the great room, and this isn't a permanent solution. So whether we decide to stay in this building or we decide to leave this building, we probably need to do something in that room. There's 3 options that we've included here. There's a replacement, there's demolish and rebuild, and there's a demolish and do nothing. And that just isn't going to go away. And so I'd be happy to take any feedback that you have right now regarding the great room. You know, we can chew on it, and you can regroup with me on it either way. But that number, if you look on the bottom right-hand corner, I mean, and this includes the most expensive option as far as the great room repair, which is the demolish and put a new boardroom. You know, we're looking at $1.3 million, $1.4 million in this building. So keep that in mind when we get into the discussion here about the Village Hall and police facility, is that this, you know, this is a significant number. And a lot of this within here, you know, this isn't putting bells and whistles, you know, on the Village Hall. I mean, it's, you know, boiler repair. We have chimneys that are falling apart on the Village Hall. It's minor tuck pointing work that's going to be done. I mean, earlier this year, we had people at Village Hall, you know, wearing coats because there was an HVAC issue. And that just isn't a good way to do business. But I'd be happy to take any feedback that you have regarding the great room here.
Jake, are we going to go back to the Village Hall? Are we coming back through everything again after you go through these?
Yeah, we're going to get to the priorities.
Okay.
Where we'll go over, you know, everything in detail. So we don't have to talk about it now, but if you have comments now, I'm happy to take those.
I'm just a little confused at the cost breakdown of those. You know, you have fiscal year 17, 18, you have certain expenses, and then fiscal year 18, 19. If we demolish, you know, how come it's broken into 2 years if we demolish and no replacement?
For the different options, you're correct, Trustee Costa. There's two different years. The first year, for example, option one, truss repair and roof replacement. The first year, $30,000, that would be for the preparation of the structural engineering plans and specifications that are needed to properly bid the project and ensure that the repair is structurally sound. And then the second year would be the actual construction costs. Option two would be the same thing. It'd be a design phase there. That would be the design for the demolition, but also for the room addition itself. And then the third option would be the demolition plans, and then for the plans and specs for the, obviously, filling in the hole and putting the correct facade on the opening that's left if the room were to be demolished completely.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. My feedback on the whole great room thing is, you know, and this, I'd have to circle back after we go through the whole budget and everything, but we keep dumping a lot of money into Village Hall every year and on Band-Aids. And I think we need to start looking at a long-term solution where we're not dumping in a couple $100,000 a year into Village Hall. So that's my input.
Appreciate that. Shifting over here to the Senior Center, there's facility maintenance within the Senior Center that, you know, we're going to have to look at over the next few years. We don't have anything this year. The Senior Center it's something that we don't have to discuss it now, but I think in the near term, we do need to discuss it. And that's why there aren't any dollars sitting there in 17, 18, so that we have maybe the next year to talk about this building. The Village of Cary owns it. We have no use for it. You know, we used to keep files. It used to be our cold storage facility, so we used to have documents in the basement. We've since pulled all those documents out. The Park District uses this facility for their senior operations on the main floor. They also have an office on the second floor. But I don't know if I really see any business reasons for why the village should continue to be the owner of this building. Again, that's not anything that we have to decide today. But you know, when you look at this, you know, there are costs over the next couple of years that, you know, we're up towards $100,000. You know, is that something that we should be, you know, spending money on? So
Have we ever looked at selling it?
not that I'm aware of, no.
I mean, if we sold it and we could possibly have the seniors go somewhere else, if we own it. I just think with these kind of repairs, we're better off just looking at possibly selling it, in my opinion.
I'm with trustee Cavelli in the sense that, I mean, my question on this is why do we maintain this building if we're not using it? Why are we spending that money? And if the Park District is, you know, providing all of the activities for the seniors, perhaps they would find another venue to do that. I do think that, we'll circle back on some of this stuff, but I do think it's something that we need to at least look at from a cost saving standpoint.
Do we know how many acres Village Hall sits on?
Yeah, I think we just did that exercise today. Was it Eric Acres Village Hall sits on, is that 1.5? 2?
Do we know how many acres Carl Senior Center occupies?
I estimate it's probably about 1 to 1.5, but I can double check that real quick here on the side.
So it's approximately the same size site as what we occupy today. And I assume there is no debt on that building at all.
No.
Okay.
Although to qualify that, the current facility here, we have a very unique situation with the configuration where we have 0 setback on one of our property lines, obviously where it abuts the community center, whereas any other new development, either existing facility or otherwise on the senior center site, you'd have to accommodate not putting a building right against the property line. So it'd be one difference as far as the numbers to numbers is a comparison, but then you also have to look at how the site is actually practically utilized.
Thank you.
So again, something that we're just going to have to talk through here, and I'd like to have, after this, maybe if folks want to do one-on-ones or 2-on-1 meetings with me, and we can talk about some of this stuff in more detail too. So just want to offer that up.
Well, the senior center, I just want to make one more comment.
Sure.
So
Go ahead.
back with the Pearl development, I was optimistic to get impact fees that would have covered all this, the $250,000. And we wouldn't be worrying about this right now. So that's my only input. Now I don't know exactly what we're going to do with it and where our seniors are going to go if we end up selling it. So I'm concerned about that.
Well, the Pearl development has an 1,800 square foot multi-use facility that was built into the program.
So for our police department, again, we're going to go through every department here. Capital projects for PD, fairly straightforward. Not going to go over every one. Are there any questions that anyone has regarding these? Facility maintenance, again, this could almost be lumped into Village Hall, but when you look at over in the police department, there are things that, we have to look at here as far as, maintaining the police department. We're not going anywhere anytime soon, but these have been included in the capital plan. The main focus and what I'd like to get, some pretty detailed discussion on tonight and feedback from the village board is, our new police/village hall building. I guess the first question is, is the village board supportive of, proceeding with a new public safety building? And if it is yes, is there a village hall component to that? And then, kind of keep in the back of your mind here, our existing building, what happens with the existing building? So with this, I kind of want to open this up for village board discussion because this is a huge project. I think the time is now. You have a police chief here that has gone through a new building process previously. Pat, we love you, but we know you're not going to be here forever. So I think this is something that we really need to spend some time on and we need to do. So want to get your feedback though.
Have you guys talked about together staying in the same building or separating the two buildings? You guys had the discussion. What makes more sense for your operations?
I think the first question, and we haven't gotten too detailed into it yet, is just, what does the board want to do?
Right.
And if the board wants to, do a public safety building in Village Hall, then we'll make it work. We will. And we can talk about that.
It'd be more cost effective if we have one building with both entities in the building.
Depending on operations and the parcel of property that we get and issues related to, parking, because hopefully we build a facility that has a training component to it and that we can host training. And right now we have no parking here, let alone no classroom to host training. So those are some issues. It's a policy decision for sure as it relates to the combination. There might be some efficiencies of scale as it relates to shared facilities, but I will tell you that McHenry City, for example, they're going through a significant renovation with their facility, and they're breaking apart the police and the village hall components. I think there's going to be a public building department might still stay with the PD, but everything else is going someplace else, and they built the new park department building on top of
I
that.
think it makes sense for them to be together. I really do. You look upstairs right now, I mean, we have Village Hall staff, there's 10, and there's 10 Village Hall staff. You know, how much more cost does it go into a building to make room for 10 more people? Now, you got to keep in mind that there's also the boardroom component. You'd want to have the boardroom a part of that as well. And so it's not just the 10 people, but other uses associated with it. There's not a big staff. And I highlight this again of, you know, our Village Hall of that $1.4 million number. And it's, you know, wanted to come back to that because it is, do we continue to, you know, pump dollars into this building? Or do we say add $2 million or whatever that number would be to this public safety building and make it police and Village Hall? And, you know, it just depends on what the board wants to do. And based on your guidance here, we'll start looking at, you know, the funding and, you know, lay everything out for you. So.
Yeah, conceptually, we should know upfront though what we're doing, because there's going to be issues related to adjacencies. You know, when you start looking at needs analysis, what components work with each other so you can place them close to each other, things of that nature. That's kind of a exercise that I'm, you know, I've had experience with.
And I think too, Trustee Cavelli, is you look at that, you know, planning component, the $30,000 that's in there. I mean, we have an architect that they can kind of talk through some of those things of, you know, where, you know, as Chief was saying, where things lay out and adding 10 more offices, what does that do to the price tag? And we can start to get you answers that you need.
Okay.
I think that it does behoove us to look at it when we're looking at how much money we're spending on maintaining this building that seems to kind of be the proverbial money pit a little bit, to coin that little phrase. You know, perhaps it's worth a dialogue with the Park District to see if they would want to take over this building. That would also alleviate the need for, perhaps I could do senior programming here for them. We certainly have had a lot of challenges, even with the boardroom down here with some reception and things like that. So I just think we have to long-term vision it, and that we really need to look at this seriously for a long-term vision for our residents as to what we're able to provide them with. That's a time when you can look at the needs analysis and decide we need some training facilities in it, and they can build it all in and make sure we deliver the proper building for our needs.
Rick, do you want to weigh in on this?
Just play the tape back from about 8 years ago.
Yeah.
right.
Then you know. Is there anybody on the board that doesn't know where I stand on this? So I guess that's my comment. We should have done this almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, we've been talking about this since 2009, and with the condition of the existing building, I mean, really, the great room is literally falling off of the building.
It's a hazard.
And it's just not safe
Right.
anymore. It's closed off. It's now becoming a storage unit for things. And we're just giving, I think I just told they're going to make this a conference room, and we need meeting spaces. And we lost the great room because that was a great meeting space for people. So now they've emptied out that's going to be another conference room. So we have to think long-term, I mean, what exactly is, you know, we need to have some hardcore decisions made. Do we want to look at the combined facility? I think the best use of the space would be a combined, you know, economies of scale. It would be, you know, one site, ideally looking at some of the properties that are available in town. There are specific pieces of property that we own that we could put something on, but we wouldn't be able to put both on, like the place on Caper. But the chief and I have talked about that's not the best place to put a police department on.
Well, I want to reserve that spot for future discussion.
Yeah. But, you know, these are huge. I mean, just the capital expenditures to keep putting money into this building. But then on the other side of the coin, if we're going to be responsible building owners that you want to sell or trade or donate, the building has to be in somewhat decent shape. So where do we draw the priority line, and what's the maintenance that needs to be done?
Jake, as we discussed earlier, I'm for looking into this option. Is there any way we could get some discussion in the future before the planning stage as to the debt service and what that would do to our budget? Because that's where my concerns lie. We discussed some of the bonds we're retiring, but this is going to be more than those bonds. So I'd like to see what the debt service payment would be for this.
Yeah, and we can start talking about that right now here too. I mean, you have your BAB bonds that are sitting out there, and, Trustee Dudek, you'll remember that was, $5 million issue here, and we're looking to have that paid off, early, which would be probably November of 2019. And we consider that as a rollover option to be able to fund this. So, Mike, if you can add to it.
Really, the two options you had, if you started today, of course, it's going to take some time to build the building. If we wanted to issue debt today in order to build a brand-new building, we'd end up going out to referendum to see if we could get it approved. Probably a little easier step, which we've talked about before, is the BAB bond issue or the street resurfacing issue originally had a maturity date on it of 2025. The first call date being when you can actually redeem all of the outstanding bonds, comes in November of 2019. That bond issue was done without a referendum, and the reason or the way it was done was they basically pledged revenues to cover the debt service. The two revenue sources that I'm aware of that are covering that debt service are the electric utility tax and motor fuel tax. Just so you know up front, we couldn't pledge MFT or motor fuel tax to build a new building. We are on the road right now to be able to retire those bonds in 2019. Based on the flow, even though the electric utility tax is coming in a little less than we planned, based on the revenues we have collected, revenues that are sitting there, we should be able to retire those bonds. Once those bonds are retired, we can then reuse those pledged revenue sources for another bond issue. Now, for part of this planning design thing, first step, of course, is to get the design sitting out there. Once the design is done, then we can figure out how large a building it is that we're going to need to build. We can figure approximate costs from that, and then I can work to lay out various debt service issues in order to cover that. Now, the BAB bond issue that was out there was about $5 million. It was set up at that time with a 2025 maturity date. I have a feeling that we'd be able to take the existing revenue source to cover up a majority of that, because odds are we'd finance a new building for 25, 30 years sitting out there, probably closer to 30 years, which in turn allows us access to more money out in the bond market, which hopefully would cover the majority of a brand new building. I don't want to mislead you and say that it would cover it all, because I have no idea what those costs are yet. But that's pretty much the strategy, or one of the strategies we've been looking at in order to provide you an easier mechanism to move forward if you chose to.
So you're saying without the motor fuel tax, electric utility tax would most likely be enough?
Well,
if we stretched out the length of terms?
We haven't used any of the motor fuel tax money at all to pay down the existing resurfacing bonds. It was just pledged there to make sure the bondholders had some sort of collateral to cover their investment that's sitting out there. Based on the electric utility tax, we can tell you what it will generate. We can pay those off, and once we get down the road here, we'll have a little more concrete information to figure out if that's going to be enough, or if we have to throw something else into the equation. You would need a pledged revenue source in order to cover that, or you would have to go out to referendum in order to build that. And I'm not saying you can't do that. It just depends on what the feeling is within the community.
Chief, can I ask, when you went through this process before, or maybe Kim, you know at Lincolnshire, because their building's relatively new, isn't it? Okay, that's relatively new compared to ours. How long does that process take? That, getting input from your board, going through conceptual drawings. What's the start and then actually to build? So what's the timeline?
Well, it took 2 years to build. So they started 2001 and they occupied 2002. So it was about 2 years to build. I don't know if that was the same experience you had. In regards to, and I'm going to call it education, because it was an educational campaign that I was part of with then Chief Bill Urey, is we would talk to anyone that we could talk to in regards to the current structure that we had and its shortcomings and our vision for what we thought we should have as a tool, because that's what the building is a tool, number one, but a facility. And we were talking about a year, about 30 years. We look to have a building that would be built for 50 years. So that, we were looking at a long-term building. So there's other issues related to that, like projection. Like, I know when we were going through it, in Lake Zurich, we looked at potential contractual policing, so we thought we would build the locker rooms a little bit bigger, have a little bit bigger facility, because there was a potential for perhaps, providing police services to other nearby jurisdictions, things of that nature. So it probably took 3 years, and then we went to referendum, and the Village of Lake Zurich went to referendum, and it was successful in regards to that, but it took a lot of effort as it related to education and perspective, trying to quantify what it actually would cost the resident as it related to what we were proposing.
Okay, so thank you for that. It's good information. So for what it's worth, I think my feeling is that this ought to be put for a placeholder for whoever the next board is. I mean, if it's going to take 2 to 3 years, then one of the first actions that the next board takes is to make a decision to move forward on this, because it's too critically important, and you're going to have 2 years where at least you'll have a cohesive group, hopefully a cohesive group, to be able to work on this.
And there's going to have to be a referendum question that is put on a ballot.
Right.
So you have to align it with,
If we go that route.
No, I was going to say, not necessarily that, but then I had a follow-up question for Michael. If, for instance, the board that's sitting in May decides that they want to move forward on this, and that conceptually everyone is on board to use the BAB bond, currently directed funding to repay it, is there any way to actually start that process and to be able to pay some of these consultant design fees, all those sorts of things? Are we in a position financially to be able to pay those things out of pocket today?
You have $1 million sitting in your building fund
Okay.
right now.
And then, so let's say you get past $1 million, you get to the point of maybe a $2 million investment. So now we're going into general funds, just conceptually I'm talking.
Well,
I don't know, though, prior to the issue, if you'd get to the point that you'd be expending $2 million.
Okay.
We have the original design with the architect, which will pretty much lay out all of the plans in terms of determining the costs. Probably one of the bigger things is just figuring out where you want to put it.
Yeah.
So we can take care of, I think, all of the preliminary costs.
Okay.
We'd like, in a perfect world, you'd like to be able to move as quickly as possible, number one, in the hopes that interest rates are still low.
Right.
If they continue to be low, then you definitely want to extend out that maturity to take advantage of those interest rates and let your money work for you.
Is there any way to be able to lock up that funding prior to actually pulling it, to the best of your knowledge?
Maybe depending on where the market is, I guess there would be an alternative maybe come earlier in 2019. If we knew we had the funds on hand that we could retire them when the bonds were first callable, to be able to get that bond issue structured and sold as quickly as possible to provide us with the proceeds that we'd need to construct the building.
And I understand the comment about, there's going to be a new board here in May, or, at least one new board member, but, we have to start making decisions now. And I'm not saying at this meeting, but for fiscal year 17, 18, the budget needs to be approved here, April 4th. And, is there a planning, line item within that budget? That's what I need feedback from the village board on.
So you're looking at the fiscal year 17, 18 is a $30,000 spend just for the planning.
Correct,
So that is
correct.
I'm good with that.
I think that we're all in agreement that there has to be some sort of a design element or planning to this, so it's a good spend.
Well, so that you can evaluate.
Right.
You have to have the plan done so you can say, is this something that we can take to that next level?
Well, this is where we have there's an architect, and however we want to structure an RFP or whatever that is, to have someone be able to answer questions that you have, if say, staff starts spending time looking at sites, how does the building sit on that site? You can talk to them about the village hall component, is it public safety or is there village hall too? But, I would like to, over time, get some buy-in too from the village board of, yeah, we're committed to a public safety building, or, yeah, we're committed to a public safety building and a village hall, Jake, and we want you to figure out how we're going to fund this, and we want to see that information. So, in the time being, and we have right now $30,000 in this existing budget, but we'll earmark dollars for next year too, unless I hear otherwise from the village board. So any other questions regarding the building for Mike or Chief? Trustee Kraus, I don't know if you had anything right now?
No.
Okay, very good. Continuing with the police department here, fleet needs. We have an opportunity here and a source of revenue to pay for those. Our vehicle and equipment fund is how these are going to be paid for, and we'll get into that, bucket of dollars here with one of our later slides. Are there any questions about police? All right, moving right along, engineering and public works. These are great photos, by the way.
There. I bet
All
you
this-
did them, didn't you, Eric?
Boy, that public works director,
We don't have a drone yet, so
he's got a big ladder.
may-
Yeah.
maybe we'll add a village drone here to the budget, so.
Kim and I talked about
Yeah.
that before.
Public Works, we're a little bit more fortunate with our Public Works building. It's not as ancient as this building, but that doesn't mean there's still costs that we're going to have to incur. Not a lot of heavy stuff, but some minor maintenance items. Any questions regarding these? Fleet and equipment, again, this comes out of the Vehicle and Equipment Fund. Over the next couple of years, we've got some, not too expensive purchases. Are there any questions that you have regarding the fleet purchases?
I'm just curiosity, why don't we have anything in 2021, 21, 22? Do we just think we'll not need any replacements of anything at that point?
Primarily because we are trying to stretch the dollars that we have and stretch the use of the equipment we have. And oddly enough, I think because of the fire that occurred at the Public Works facility back in circa 2000, we had a big rush of equipment that was all purchased at the same time, which all happens to, unfortunately, then wear out at the same time from a life expectancy standpoint. So the past 15 years or so have been spent trying to obviously stagger replacements, but despite that fact, we still have a big rush from 15 years ago. Vehicles last 8 to 10 years, so you kind of see the effect that it has. We didn't want to needlessly put money in program money for something we didn't need at that point, so that's the reason for the hole there.
Makes sense.
So as not to confuse you, though, it's probably good for you to know that the schedule that you're looking here, the vehicles that are funded from Vehicle and Equipment Fund do not include any of the water and sewer utility vehicles all of those would be included in the water and sewer fund. That's, so they're not on that schedule.
Yeah, that's a good point. And two, for folks that are looking at this, at home, we try to put, on the bottom of these slides, where the funding is coming from, so that you have a sense of what bucket of dollars we're pulling from to pay for this.
Haven't we put some money from Meyer into the vehicle and equipment fund?
Yes,
But how much, do you know?
$2 million.
All of it.
Okay, so pretty big number.
Yeah.
We'd have a pretty big hole
Yeah.
if it wasn't for that.
We had, $2 million for vehicle and equipment, and you had some, land conservancy fees and some fees that went towards the path, so. Metro station improvements, this project is ongoing here. We're, on your agenda here tonight is for purchase and sale of an easement with Union Pacific for that project. And so, we're continuing to work through here. Next step too, we'll be working with Metro as far as an IGA goes for the project. They'll be handling the, procurement process here, and, we're trying to, keep this as a, 2018 project. Are there any questions that you have regarding this? The downtown streetscape, I'll say I'm a pretty big proponent of this project, but it's a big expense. And, we don't have to get feedback right now. And we can talk about this more when we get to the end of the presentation, so that you can kind of see how, the bucket of dollars balances out. But it's a pretty significant project. I mean, with your downtown, you want your downtown, again, in my opinion, you want your downtown to be the focal point. You have a lot of improvements that are going on right now. You have some new businesses that are opening up in the downtown. We have a new metro station that we'll be, constructing here in 2018. And you want the streetscape to be inviting, where people spend time in the downtown. They go from restaurant to restaurant. And so we have a phased approach. The phase one, project, there'd be a pretty big expense. You're looking at, $800,000 in year one. That would be next year. And in year two, again, year two is still part of phase one. We're looking at $250,000. And so it's not a cheap project, but I think you get a lot of value out of this, and it's tangible. I mean, it's something that all the residents can see, experience, visitors can see and experience it. And so I'll take any feedback that you have regarding this right now. We can talk more when we get into, just looking at how the buckets of dollars play out here. But are there any comments about the downtown project?
Have we looked at extending that out to the 5 years? I see there's 3 years with nothing in it, rather than the 2-year cost expense. And with the police department and the village hall expense being such a large one, and to me, that's something we need, obviously, with the condition that this building is in. And I see this more as something that, I agree, I think it's also a need, but is it more of a want than the building? So can we extend this into the 5 years rather than the 2 years? Would that cut back on some of the costs?
Yeah, I'll start and Eric can finish here. But, with something like this, I mean, you want to get in and get out as soon as you can, just so that there isn't a lot of disturbance within the downtown. You also think too about, economies of scale. I mean, you do as much as you can to try to get the best, price that you can. But Eric, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
And yeah, this phase one here is, you'll see on the subsequent slides, there are other components to it to continue and finish that project. You'll see there that phase one stops just short of the High Road intersection. So there is a second phase that would have to follow up probably in that 5-year window. That's not included in the first round because we would have to find the money and budget for a plan for the signal replacements, because we can't do the streetscape there without fixing the signals first. And we don't want to disrupt and rip out work we just finished up and prettied up. So I would say that if the focus, if there is going to be a priority placed on the downtown improvements, it is a 5-year process to hit that. The first big chunk, I think the most impact you'll see is in that first phase. And like Jake said, you get that get that project in that $1 million range, yeah, you really get a good chance of getting good unit costs, good scale of economy, but also a big impact. If you reduce the size of the project or spread it out, you run the risk of each improvement having such a small impact that it's not that noticeable and not that eventful from a perspective of maintaining business vitality of current businesses, attracting new businesses to the downtown, attracting other property owners to develop in town because they see the anchor that we have in our vibrant and updated downtown, especially with regards to competition. Getting more in Brian's area here, but other communities here are also investing in their downtowns, and we're not the only ones looking at this as a priority and an important tool to get development to occur in our communities. Algonquin's spending a lot of money improving their downtown. Huntley's just finishing up the first phase and continuing that. Crystal Lake recently finished, in the last 10 years, big changes to their downtown. It's, like I mentioned, it's something that does have more far-reaching efforts than just improving the infrastructure, but it's going to take several years to be able to do it in chunks we can afford and manage. And that $1 million range, I think, is that spreading out into a 5-year process that if we want to make this a priority, this is probably the best way to do that.
And just just because our neighbors are doing it doesn't mean that you have to feel like, you have to do it. We just have to be cognizant of that and have to have that in the back of our head here, so.
And with the large expense of like the metro station, I mean, do we have the funds for this?
Well, again, kind of think, and we'll get into this later, but, the bucket of dollars of where everything is, coming at here, metro station, it's in the parking fund bucket of dollars. This, is this first phase, if we go back to it, this is capital projects. So this is coming out of the capital projects bucket of dollars. When we get into phase 2, so the high road portion, capital projects bucket of dollars. The second component of phase 2 here would be parking fund bucket of dollars. And so there is money for this, but it is going to, restrict your other funding within the capital projects fund. And so it just comes as, what is the priority of the village board? I mean, it's part of the reason why we're doing this 5-year capital plan, so you can look at these things globally.
So what would be restricted then? It just.
Well, and we're gonna get to that at the later slides, and
Okay.
you can kind of see, within our capital projects fund, we're going to have a cash flow issue, whether or not we do this project. It's just if we do this project, our cash flow issue becomes, shortened here. We can extend it further, obviously, if we don't do this project, so.
So my only comment about this, and again, I think I'm on record of wanting to do downtown beautification going back to the first time I was on the board 10 years ago, so I'm all for it. My concern is whether it's 6 months or 2 years, something is going to happen in Maplewood. And given the proximity of Maplewood to this, I'm just a little bit concerned about spending almost $1 million without really knowing the bigger picture. And it really, Jake, it harkens back to comments that I've made at village boards for 10 years about putting money into this building, is we've put probably several millions of dollars into this building since I've been on the board, none of which I've ever cared to do. And here we might be making an expenditure for $1 million only to have something happen in Maplewood, whatever that something is, in the relatively near future. And how does that change the scope of this area? It could change it dramatically. What if you have, I'm just going to throw out 200 market rate apartments there, and you have to provide for parking. Therefore, you're going to have a lot more traffic on Main Street. I mean, there are potential impacts to what we want to do here that a development in Maplewood would definitely affect. And I'm not sure I'm ready to, sign up for something that I've supported for 10 years, don't get me wrong. But those decisions were made when Maplewood wasn't for sale.
Yeah, and
now it is.
I understand that. I'm not trying to push in any direction, but do you think that the downtown location is going to change if Maplewood is developed?
I don't know. No, I don't. What I think, though, is I think that the feel of this stretch of road is going to be a lot different if you have 200 or 300 apartments, let's say, built on the Maplewood site at some point in time. I don't know that this is an expenditure that I'm 100% comfortable with, not knowing how that acreage is going to be developed.
Have you thought about, or remember talking about, and it's in here too, regarding the High Street or High Road extension going out to
I was going to have
Carroll
the
County?
same comment.
Well, that would alleviate some of the traffic concerns.
But again, those are unknowns at this point. And there are also things that you have the potential as a board to negotiate in with the developer. Yeah, you want to put something over here?
You're gonna have to-
What are you bringing to the village? Are you going to make the High Road extension for us? Are you going to do downtown improvement and streetscape for us? I mean, I get livid over this because I've dealt with boards over and over here that don't see the long-term view and make the right decisions. And that's how we get into some of these scenarios where we use Band-Aids, to Jim's word earlier, over and over and over again. And then at some point, something happens, we all sit back and go, oh, I wish we wouldn't have done that. And I don't want to see us do that. This is a wonderful plan. I've been for it all along, and a few people on this board, Jeff and Mark and Jake, that have served with me the longest, know how passionate I am about downtown. I just think that something's going to happen, and I'm just not so confident that I want to put this kind of money into that, given the other needs, particularly this building. That's just my overall comment.
Let's do it from this side. Any comments?
My concerns don't revolve around Maplewood, even though I think there are some valid concerns there. But I hear a lot of business owners that are getting upset on the intense focus on downtown. And this is a lot of money, and it makes me almost want to say, where's the 800,000 or $1 million for the businesses that aren't located downtown? That's my only thought on it.
I think that valid points on both ends, but I still believe that as you're coming into Cary, if you have a new metro station, you want to have the best, to use a coin of real estate phrase, you want to have the best curb appeal, which is also going to attract more businesses. I mean, what are we doing? I understand, I think those are legitimate concerns that we need to look at, and when we should do it and how we should implement it and what we should do. But I still think that at some point it should be a focus of the board to make sure that we optimize our downtown area and make it as inviting as possible for businesses and for our residents, so they have a destination to hang out downtown and enjoy what's down there for them.
Could I just add something, Jeff? Were you going to?
Just everybody's making good points. I mean, it's things to think about, wants versus needs.
Right.
Right?
Maplewood,
Yep.
businesses outside of the downtown. I mean, everybody's got a valid point.
I guess, as far as bringing people into Cary, it seems like downtown's pretty full right now, Are there any vacancies, Brian, downtown?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's been a pretty good focus on that, and I'm worried that if we, I can see some small-scale improvements but this just seems like an awful lot of money to focus on that area when we have other areas that need some of our emphasis too.
Yeah, and I understand all the points that are being made as well. From looking at the downtown, the streetscape plan is really looking at the infrastructure that the village owns and trying to enhance the pedestrian way that's downtown. So looking at ways you can enhance the aesthetics of that area. As development comes in, if it's properties that are immediately next to this portion of the roadway that's going to be improved, there are ways you can work with the developers to improve their right-of-way that they have frontage on so that it's consistent with the plans that we've developed. So if the downtown area expands further west along Main Street, if those properties start to redevelop, you can continue that streetscape as part of those redevelopment efforts. And likewise, if something happens across Route 14, if those properties redevelop, you can continue it as part of the development to have those developers make those improvements to the public way that are directly adjacent to their property. So it's, this would be kind of putting our footprint out there as far as what the design or intent would be for the downtown area and downtown proper, if you will. And then you can expand on that as development occurs. The Maplewood site, depending how that would go, when that would development would occur, you could also do the same thing to have a developer of that property incorporate this streetscape design into their development so that there's a connection between the two properties from that standpoint, so that there's a unique feel or consistent look to the downtown area. But the point of investing in the downtown area is to make it more attractive, from a standpoint. There are concerns of other businesses outside the downtown, but you're looking at the core of where the community started. They're older buildings, older infrastructure, and it has a different feel than other, retail or commercial areas that the village would have. So it does make it somewhat unique, but there are ways that we can look at other areas as well to improve infrastructure to serve those properties as well.
So maybe it's important to hear the rest of the presentation and then listen to you, Jake, as you're talking about trying to fill gaps. I think, to me, from what I heard, is this is one that people could put off if need be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll get into some of the slides later here that show kind of the bucket of dollars and how this would impact that. So, yeah, absolutely appreciate the feedback on this.
Oh, one final question. Given that it says 1718 is just construction, all of the planning and design has already been paid for and in place, and this is basically shovel-ready? Is that what you're indicating by saying this?
Yes, the current contract that is in our fiscal year right now basically included the development of construction-ready documents for the phase one portion, and then development to the pre-final level of the other outlying phases, so that when we move forward, if we move forward on the other pieces, it's a relatively short time frame and investment to get to that next step to get it bid for construction.
Okay, thanks, Eric.
Okay, very good. And then this was phase two. We've kind of touched on phase two here. Community signage. This was an item that we had in, our current fiscal year budget, and we kind of, put off. There was some, various viewpoints on the signage, and so we put that on the side as priorities have come up here. But, we've added it, to our 5-year plan here, and again, want to get any feedback that the village board has. But we've got, entrance signage here, wayfinding. There was discussion previously about, electronic message board signage too, and it also comes down to, well, where does all this go here? But we've got a lot of different options. Director Morimoto has put together some various different slides here, and or I should say images of just what this could look like. And so we've got placeholders for cost, but they can fluctuate. They can go up and down based on how aggressive the board wants to be, or if the board doesn't want to be aggressive with this, we can do that too. So happy to take any feedback that you have regarding signage within the community.
So for clarification, Eric, village entry sign replacements, how many signs is that?
It would vary depending on the bid results, but we, was previously presented for the different options. It replaces all the existing locations, so that's the 4 current sites along the main roadways, Route 14, Carroll Algonquin Road, and 3 Oaks Road. And then also adding some other, the smaller scale sign, the one that's not as elaborate, at some of the other secondary entry points like Crystal Lake Road and Russell Bridge Road. So in total, I believe there were 8.
Okay.
And we can scale this, absolutely.
My only comment on signage, because I really did like the designs that you brought when we looked at them. Some of them are here. I have a challenge with putting a beautiful entryway sign, and I'm talking about the one on 14 now by the bridge, right next to something that looks like a dilapidated shack. So to me, and I said the same thing earlier about the sign on the west end of town, you're coming in and the first thing you see is, for all intents and purposes, a construction yard and a vacant building that looks terrible. And to me, I don't want to link the Village of Cary with either that east or west piece of property. I would like to see, I think you said you could take a look at moving the signs closer to where the Village of Cary is more properly represented by newer things and nice and clean things. So to me, if this type of thing moves forward, having the ability to put those signs in a location where it's representing property, where the property owners take care of their property as opposed to the pieces that I'm talking about, would be the only way I would want to invest in new signage, entryway signage.
And that was a point well taken during the previous discussions that you'd raised, and I do have 2 alternate sites identified. So if the board programs this as a priority, we will obviously have to get, for the Route 14 locations, new right-of-way use permits from the state. But that's just a process we would go through, and we would be able to move them. The western end of town, I would propose moving that sign, actually where you would propose it, westward, so it aligns more with approximately where the new Dunkin' Donuts and where the backside of Aldi is, in that range, or that segment of the roadway. And on the east end, we could possibly move it further east towards Ebert, where the village has some property, just stops at the Selkie property.
You mean further
West.
west? Yeah, I was going to say further east, wouldn't
Oh,
it?
I'm sorry, yeah. Westward from the current spot towards almost immediately next to the eastern limits of Lake Julian's property.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I say, where the property owners show a care and commitment to keeping their property looking the way it should look, then I think investing in new signage is appropriate, but I don't want to spend money on a sign that's worth more than the house that it's standing next to.
And that is, we would lose some of the scale of economy from the bid process, but it is something that could be scaled. I think Trustee Cavelli had mentioned, or asked at the time we discussed it last time, if it's something we could do in phases, and that is an option.
Yeah.
Any thoughts from over here?
I think our biggest challenge is going to be all these things are wonderful enhancements to our village, and we just have to prioritize because we're not going to have all the funds to do it.
Okay, very good. Moving on with the signage theme. Again, additional signage here, illuminated street sign, street name replacement sign. You'll see here at the bottom left, our current signs right now for the street name signs are not compliant. So that's why this, program is over 5 years here to pay for this. Are there any questions regarding the signage here? Proposed infrastructure improvements, so 2017, and again, this is just draft here, but it kind of gives you a snapshot of, where is everything that we'll be working on. And this is a good image, I think, that just shows that, we're not just touching one spot of the community, but it's all over Cary where infrastructure improvements are going to take place. Our MFT program, this is funded here through, it's based on per capita, so our population, which funds this. MFT projects, over the next 5 years, you can see them here before you. Are there any questions that you have regarding these projects? Okay. Our current road network, we talked about the BAT bonds a little bit earlier here today. And if you see in 2010, our street rating, the IMS rating, and this is an outside consultant that we use, to provide this street rating. We were at 68, 69. And with that BAT bond program, we were able to, climb up to 78, 79, which is where we were at the high point, in 2013 and 2014. And that's very good. I mean, that is very good for a community of Cary's size. The 5-year projection, and this is something that's a little bit different than what was in your packet, and it's actually good news that it's different. Continuing with our, MFT program here, we dipped to a 72, but, our goal through the strategic plan process was to maintain roads at least, a 70. So we're trending, down, but, 72 is still pretty good for our roads. It's something that we don't have to, solve right now, but it's going to be, on the village board's radar. It's got to be for the next 5-10 years is, MFT dollars, they aren't going to sustain us forever here in perpetuity. And so whether it's another, bond issue or whatnot, or another funding source that we have dedicated to roads, that's something that we're going to have to look at. It's not now, but we have to work on this as a group over the next few years.
Jake, I'd like to ask Michael a quick question. It's going back to the BAB bonds.
Yes.
So the BAB bonds, do they have both MFT and electric utility, or just electric utility designated for repayment?
Well, they pledged both revenue sources to cover the coverage they needed to sell the bonds. No MFT money has been used to pay for any of the existing BAB bonds. It has only been the electric utility debt.
So do we have the ability to remove the pledge of MFT from the BAB bonds?
No. You would not have the ability to remove that pledge until the point in time that they were retired. I would have to look closer at the covenants to see if even a small piece of it could be broken off. But odds are, for the protection of the bondholders, those pledges would remain.
So fast forwarding to 2019, would you see when assuming that the board at that time decides to retire the bonds, the potential to take the MFT funds and segregate them for a separate loan, if you will, or bond issue, much like we did the BAB bonds, to bring a bulk of money in and do roadwork improvement, that exists then? Would it not?
Currently, we're already using all of the MFT funds for the road work that we're doing currently, and based on the schedule that Eric presented. For a building bond, I would not pledge the MFT because the MFT can't be used for a building. But depending on the size of that bond issue and the amount of bonds that we would have to sell, the electric utility tax may not by itself necessarily provide enough coverage for those bonds, and something else might have to be pledged to provide us that coverage.
My question's a little bit different, but I understand what you're saying. I'm more looking at a point in time, in 2019 is the earliest point in time,
Correct.
would we have a funding source to be able to do essentially what we did with the BAB bonds, which is to say, let's take more money, because if you look at the trend, we're going back towards the 70%, right, on the roads. And when we did BAB bonds, it obviously made a tremendous improvement village-wide. So my question is just a little different, and, I'm an idea guy, so you have to tell me if it's possible. Could you take a loan out or bond, get another big chunk of money, and utilize MFT to repay that over a period of time, doing a chunk of road work quicker?
I believe the only way we could take out a loan to cover those types of improvements would require us to go to referendum.
Okay.
We would need almost another pledged revenue source sufficient to provide us coverage for that additional project that you were looking at.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, you would have to find another revenue source for it. So.
Okay.
And you remember the BAB bonds, that was federal?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, if we're not using it now, but yet we're pledging it, is there an opportunity when we no longer have that obligation to take those same funds and put them against a larger chunk of money? That's all.
Well, you see here too, going back to this last slide, here's our MFT dollars at work for the next 5 years. So, and then this kind of shows you in more detail, those roads. So again, nothing is set in stone here for the village board, but this is those MFT dollars going back into the village.
And I'd add that even though you see the overall network average declining, which is natural just with age and no action on any roadway, the work we've done obviously in the last 5 years, and then the work proposed in this 5-year road program that you see here, we do actually put a lot we put attention and much needed effort into a lot of the most heavily traveled roadways. So you see a lot of the big collector streets are being taken care of. So while the network average is declining, it's still in the satisfactory range, still in a very good range, over 70 as a whole. We're taking care of, I think, the most important roadways and heavily utilized and high-profile roadways from the past 5 years and the next 5 years. So I don't want the number declining to look like we're in a horrible position.
Yeah.
It's not the best, but it's still, we're putting the dollars to good use.
We don't want to sound the alarms. It's just something that, you have to be aware of here, so.
Okay.
And again, just further related to the roadway improvements, here's kind of a snapshot of what we have going on. This gives it to you more diagram. We've already started, phase 1 related work. That was something that the village board had approved for the First Street extension, and then also for the Maplewood access road, our Three Oaks Road, the phase 2 work. I mean, you're pretty familiar with that project as well. Are there any questions that you have going back here to the roadway improvements?
Anything? No? Good.
Drainage improvements, just another component, that we look at as far as the infrastructure goes. I think most importantly here is, that Sunset and Crest project is starting to be wrapped up here, and, certainly appreciate, Eric taking the lead on that. That was probably one of your first projects that, when you came to Cary, it's like taking that over from the previous director. And so we've done a lot of good work on that, and it's a good story. So any questions? Pedestrian and bicycle improvements. The one that I'd like to focus on here is the Fox Trail sidewalk extension. You can see here, this is in plan view, and going back into our spreadsheet, that's a $370,000 construction cost, but it fills a huge gap in that sidewalk network. There's multiple options that you have for, funding that. I would say, my recommendation is that, since we had the, restrictions taken off the Land Conservancy Fund, I would recommend the village board consider funding it out of there. That's just one possibility for you to consider, but it's a significant project. You can see it's, connecting the back half of the subdivision in with the front and gets them into that trail network here back into the village. So are there any questions, questions that you have regarding, pedestrian and bike improvements here? And we're going to get into a couple more here that I have as far as slides. The sidewalk gap program, and this connects more of the, Main Street area into the Selkie property and finishes that gap. I guess if, folks wanted to walk to Burger King, they'd be able to walk to Burger King a little bit easier. So I don't know if that's,
Can they walk
an
through them?
interest.
I don't think they can walk through them.
It's a drive-through, not a
I
walk-through.
know.
They wouldn't serve you if they could.
Yeah, probably not, But there'd be some options for us to, consider if, capital projects fund dollars, or is this, it is TIF eligible to be funded out of the TIF that we have there. So that's something that the board can think about. Our sidewalk gap program, this, appeared in one of the previous slides early on, and we're working on, potential grant for this. Again, just continuing on our theme of trying to, connect paths, sidewalks throughout the community. This isn't a project for now, but as the Meyer material, the site develops over time, and we have that parking lot built, and we have the pass system around there. It's connecting folks to that site and providing another access for them. And so this would be a trail connection that would go along Cary Algonquin and then through a property that the village owns ultimately to the Myers site. And so it's not something, for now, but as that property develops for us to look at here as, another connection to get folks to that site. Water and sand, do you want to keep going, Mayor, here?
Why don't we go like another 5 minutes?
Okay. Water and sanitation, and again, as Mike had mentioned, you know, your water and sanitation improvements, it's all paid for through the user fees and the rates that residents are paying. Our phosphorus project, you know, this is for the wastewater treatment plant. We've talked to the village board about this previously. This is something that's ongoing right now. Construction, you know, is planned to be completed here in October 18. And Eric, if you could just give them a brief commercial about where we're at with this.
Yes, currently we're in the midst of the design process. Some of the components that design that have EPA review and approval, that's ongoing and going well. We're still on target to meet the milestone dates that the EPA has set in our NPDES permit, which, as Jake mentioned, has the construction started and in a position to be completed by October of 18 to meet that regulatory deadline. And that, just for refresher, is the project to meet the phosphorus limits for our discharge. So we're utilizing some existing capacity and tankage to design a biological phosphorus removal system with chemical backup, and then some other ancillary improvements to the plant that make sense to do at the same time when you have that work being done.
Thank you. Additional sanitation projects that we have over the next 5 years. Again, not going to go through every one, but if there are questions that the board has, here we can talk about any projects. And this, I should step back here to, we are probably in the late spring, early summer, be bringing the water rate study to the village board to consider here. All these projects are going to be included in there so that, you know, the rates are factual rates. We have, right now, the rates are set through the spring of 2018. And so I'd like to have the rate structure approved for the next 5 years, sometime either later this summer or this fall. But you will be getting that project, the rate study here in a few months.
Are we still talking at all with Fox River Grove about doing anything combined?
No.
No.
Okay, I didn't think so, but I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Again, wastewater treatment plant maintenance, we got it separated here into maintenance and major repair items. Any questions? Okay, our water meter replacement program. This has been a great program, and it significantly helps our staff. It is very important as far as efficiency goes. Eric, if you could just kind of give them a high-level overview on where we're at with this.
Yes, this is part of a multi-year program, and it's happy to say at this point we're about the halfway, if not past the halfway point. So what we're doing is we're replacing all the existing residential meters in town and using more state-of-the-art units that allow us to do remote read. So for the current existing units, it requires a staff member to walk those routes and actually physically take a device and tap it up against the reading pad against the side of the house for each meter read, which is done then every 2 months. With the new iPearl meters, we can do remote read basically through a vehicle, drive around town, and once it's completed, what takes staff currently a couple weeks and almost all our department to accomplish the readings, we can probably do with one staff member and one vehicle, and in a matter of about an hour, or minutes actually, probably less than an hour.
That's huge.
So it is an incredible time saver, and also much needed anyway, as the meters that are in many of these homes are approaching their life expectancy. So, but we're still, even despite not hitting as many the last couple of years due to some vacancies in staffing positions, we weren't hitting that 700 meter per year target, but we were close. We're still on target though to get that complete by 2020.
Thanks, Eric.
Continuing on, drinking water system, numerous projects in here over the next 5 years. Does the village board have any questions regarding these projects? And also fleet. And this, as was mentioned earlier, the fleet, it doesn't come out of the vehicle and equipment fund. This is all paid out of the water and sand. So different buckets of dollars here. Any questions regarding fleet replacement? Okay, I think we'll come back and, you know, regroup on this slide at village board.
And we'll do department heads at village board too. That's okay. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Adjourned.